When you see someone biting their fingernails, what's your first reaction? For as long as I can remember, I was always scolded if I was caught biting my fingernails as a child. My mom always told me to stop doing that or that's gross. Do you know your hands with them? So whenever I saw people biting their nails, I associated it with a lack of self-control or having poor hygiene. My personal reaction to the habit stems from cleanliness, discipline, and appearance. When I see someone our age biting their nails, I always think about maturity and how they haven't grown out of the childish habit, as we all did as kids. But after taking time to dive into this habit, I learned that it could be a lot more than just something we did as kids. After doing some research, I actually found that nail biting is a very common behavior. Nail biting is something that happens when people are coping with stress, anxiety, boredom, or even just straight up concentration. People bite their nails not as a conscious decision, and it's something that happens automatically when they're nervous, thinking hard, or overwhelmed in certain situations, whether that's taking an exam, working on homework, writing an essay, anything in like the workforce. So after speaking to 10 or so people, most of them said that they bit their nails when they were a child, but just so happened to grow out of the habit, which actually happened to myself. But a few people said that they still catch themselves biting their nails and don't even realize they're doing it. The most common response I received when asking people when they were most likely to catch themselves biting their nails was either working on an assignment, at work, or thinking deeply on something, writing an essay, taking an exam, really anything that causes like stress, is stress-inducing or anxiety. Now, there are a few people who actually benefit from this habit, such as industries who create bitter nail polishes to prevent people from biting their nails, which actually a good friend of mine used when they were younger, as well as just like straight-up nail salons and beauty care industries who offer manicures, artificial nails, or different treatments that are designed to stop the habit. Like if you have nail polish on like I do right now, it's harder to bite through your actual nail because there's such a thick layer of something else on top that you can't really get through it. And then there's also a big chunk of people who really just don't care for the habit and it doesn't really bother them. They see it as something harmless until it becomes a severe problem or causes injury to someone's hands. Then they said that they are most likely to step in and say, okay, what's going on? So after taking time to dive a little bit deeper into this topic, I realized that nail biting isn't just focused on nails, but rather mental health and stress, or the formation of bad habit, social expectations of like your self-control and just overall appearance. And biting your nails itself is closer to a wicked problem because our day-to-day life produces such high-stress situations where anxious people are unconsciously developing small coping mechanisms such as nail biting, fidgeting with their hands, scrolling on their phones, which I'm guilty of, and many others. These small little habits can all help regulate someone's emotions. This habit that is seen as dumb or childish becomes a visible part of a much deeper issue. That is how people cope and deal with stress and distract themselves in high-pressure situations. For my 5 points of change, I suggest that for the bold idea is to create stress-friendly environments in schools or workplaces where people are able to take a break and like fidget with something, doodle on a piece of paper, or use sensory toys to distract, and not be left with solely their hands to distract themselves, which would lead people putting their hands in their mouth and biting their fingernails. These spaces would recognize nervous habits and help regulate attention and stress. For working with existing systems, I suggest that schools incorporate a short form of education on the matter that could explain our body's repetitive behaviors and understanding why these habits happen, can reduce stigma and encourage healthier alternatives to, for example, biting your fingernails. And then for small scale, I suggest that people just simply buy fidget toys or use textured objects, chewing gum, or even stress balls to keep your hands and mouth busy so that you're not left with just those two. So these alternative ideas can give a similar sensory relief without damaging nails. And then for the wild idea, I suggested the creation of a type of bracelet that prevents you from putting your hands in your mouth while working. So when you start working, you put the bracelets on, and if your hands like come in close contact with your mouth, it would either vibrate or shock. So it would prevent you from obviously bringing your hands up to your mouth. And then lastly, for my empathy approach, I suggested rather, instead of criticizing people off the bat, if you see them biting their nails, being like, stop that or that's gross, which I've been guilty of, to approach the situation with asking if someone's stressed, like, are you stressed out, which then reopens the habit as a signal of like emotional need rather than like a flaw that someone has. And then for my drawing, I chose red as a pop of color. It symbolizes pain, stress, and pressure, which I figured matched the situation perfectly. I chose to draw 2 hands, reflecting back on my idea of biting your fingernails. The red highlights the area in which it takes place, which I just did 1 nail. And then on the outer edges, I chose to darken the outsides with scribbles, creating like a more chaotic, like anxiety-inducing-ish vibe happening. That reflects the atmosphere of the habit. I chose the word urge because biting fingernails is more of an internal impulse rather than a habit that needs to be fought in order to protect your hands and personal image. The word urge demonstrates not only that all habits are a choice, but rather a response to emotional tension.